Hi, my name is Helen Neville, and I am a past president of APA Division 45. I am thrilled that the division is beginning to look at the critical question about what does solidarity across groups and types of privilege mean. I think that's so important. I want to thank everyone that is involved with that initiative, including Evie Garcia, Nichi Fu, and Rebecca Fork. Um, just thinking about this, I always like to reflect on, who writes about this, because it's not just us beginning to think through these issues. And I want to start off with a quote by Angela Davis from her book, Freedom is a Constant Struggle. And the quote is, "It is in collectivities that we find reservoirs of hope and optimism." I start off with that because I believe it hits at this notion of a radical notion of hope and optimism that is needed to understand that no matter our current condition, that if we build communities of resistance, we have the ability and the responsibility to create a better, more egalitarian tomorrow. So when I think about poor, Black, Indigenous, and people of color solidarity, I really see this that change can happen only when we work collectively to identify the root causes of the condition that limit full potentiality of our people, and that we work collectively to address those root causes. And I want to be really clear about what I mean by when I think about our people. I mean the people that keep us grounded, our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, our siblings, the people that are toiling in the fields, growing our food, the people that are working jobs that allow us to continue to live in our society, the folks that provide us with meaning and purpose, and that to give our lives joy. And these are the people who are exploited through systems of capitalism and racial oppression. And I want to acknowledge that the most vulnerable of our people are members who are multiply marginalized. So not only by class and race, but in addition to gender, religion, sexual orientation, and ability status. So as I reflect on, what are some of the implications of Black, Indigenous, and people of color solidarity for us and the work of Division 45, I think of a couple of quick questions. One is, how can we build communities of resistance within our organization? I think we need to start at home first. And so within our division, what does it mean that we can create this resistance within our respective individual communities and our collective community of Division 45? I also think it's important for us to reflect on in what ways can we partner with community organizations to nurture what Martin Luther King called this notion of beloved community, communities built on social justice and freedom and love and respect. How do we help envision and actualize that? These communities are absolutely essential for us to name and resist racial capitalism and other forms of oppression, and for us to offer an alternative way of existing. And it seems such an easy kind of task, but when we are socialized under white supremacy and capitalism that are designed by its very nature to separate us, it infiltrates all of the work that we do within our communities and our work to build solidarity across our communities. That's by design. And so how to step back, for us to listen deeply to one another, and for us to create within ourselves are these systems of social justice, freedom, love, respect that doesn't buy into notions of racial capitalism, where certain groups are better or worse, or we have to be hyper productive, or we have to grind, or we have to do this, or where we look down on poor people. I think that's really, really critical that we begin to look at that. So this work involves, it's really difficult work. It involves dismantling white supremacy, and it also involves dismantling anti-Blackness in each of our Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. It demands for us to amplify the voices of Indigenous people, for the folks whose land in which we are on. It invites us to challenge capitalism. And I don't think that is something that we as a division has come to grips with. But I honestly believe that we cannot challenge white supremacy and or begin to address some of our issues unless we think about capitalism. And I think we really need to roll up our sleeves to think about the impact of economic exploitation on the majority of our people. I believe Division 45 can lead us in this struggle, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what emerges from this initiative. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day and dialogue.
Hello, everyone. My name is Art Bloom. I'm an Indigenous psychologist and past president of APA Division 45. A few of us have been asked to talk about our visions for solidarity, and I humbly offer my words. You know, a significant part of the history of colonial societies has involved divisive colonial splitting tactics to promote animosity toward one another, towards our groups, rather than focusing our efforts on the source of our oppression and exploitation, the colonial worldviews and systems and processes around us. Colonial splitting tactics have been used to prevent the solidarity of Black and Brown people for generations. Those with colonial privilege have benefited greatly from the divisions. When we struggle against one another, or when we overlook the needs of other Black and Brown groups with a not our problem viewpoint, we are in effect aiding those who wish to see us siloed. Colonial splitting has also harmed white Americans, but they're unable sometimes to see that the same systems that have manipulated and controlled Black and Brown people also manipulate and control them. Many would benefit from becoming allies. Colonial privilege persists because of the artificial hierarchies in society that have been imposed on all of us. Deceit, manipulation, divisiveness meant to preserve the hierarchy, and so far it's worked. When we join together in solidarity, on the other hand, it's a decolonizing act to resist and retire the colonial view that allows privilege to persist. When united, we are stronger, we are better, and we are wiser. From an Indigenous point of view, we act as egalitarian people in an interdependent world order, claiming our shared sacredness in the process. Colonization has harmed all of us through our interdependence. It's not just a Black or brown problem, it's a white problem as well. Now, solidarity, on the other hand, breaks the yokes of hierarchy and frees us to work together to retire colonial injustices and inequities together. An empowering act for all of us. Solidarity offers us the collective opportunity as psychologists to heal the social system that victimizes, allowing us as psychologists to simultaneously heal individuals and society. Thank you for your time.
Hi, My name is Alvin Alvarez, and I'm a former president of Division 45. I want to thank Rebecca and Rich and Michi for creating this space to talk about a topic that's pretty much been on most of our minds. I also want to thank Evie Garcia to make this as part of her presidency. I've been asked to talk a little bit about solidarity and what comes to mind, and I've only got about 2 or 3 minutes to do that. So let me do my best because it's a tall order. I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think about solidarity is empathy, right? It's the willingness to experience the world as others experience it, whether or not it's similar to your own. It's a willingness to see that experience, open yourself to that experience, and make that experience matter to you. I think that's the heart for me of solidarity, which then leads me to the issue of humility. I see humility in solidarity. It's ultimately that comes from a stance of willingness to learn, a willingness to listen, an accountability to others, and a willingness to really look at yourself in the mirror, which then leads me to really about principle and integrity, because I think to look in the mirror, it means to really look at all aspects of yourself, to look at those places of privilege as well as those places and experiences of oppression, to look at it both, to look at yourself as a whole across all the intersectionalities that we carry, whether that's across race and gender, sexual orientation, age, nativity, religion, etc. And more importantly, to apply that understanding, those principles of equity and justice to others, just as you would want it for yourself. That kind of consistency across all the different forms of identity, and then that willingness to extend that sense of commonality is a matter of principle. It's a matter of integrity. And it's not an easy thing. Many of us are comfortable with certain parts of our identity and identify strongly with that. But solidarity pushes us beyond our comfort zones, right? Part of the reason I think it pushes us beyond our comfort zone is, for me, solidarity also involves a redistribution of power, right? A redistribution of privileges and resources, and a willingness on each of us to elevate others, to advance the causes of others, even when the cost is a cost to us, right? And so there's a willingness and an openness to advance for the greater good. And that's hard. That's hard. That kind of solidarity work is hard, which then leads me to the other piece. When I think about solidarity, I also think about practice, and I think about kindness, right? Because of the challenges of this kind of work, and the fact that we often don't have many role models at this, this is something that we will all struggle with, right? But for me, solidarity involves a willingness to try, a patience to fail, but also the grit to keep trying, to get up and to keep going, right? And the patience with one another to stay together in the midst of those struggles, right? And that is a practice. And it involves a kindness and a patience with one another. The last few things that really come to mind is that ultimately for me, solidarity has to be an action. It's not just a feeling of empathy. It's not just a matter of one's principles, but it has to be an action. It needs to be doing something. It needs to create spaces where we come together to co-create something that may not have ever existed. We spend a lot of time talking a lot nowadays about racial justice. And I find that that's actually challenging to imagine what that looks like in reality, right? We know what racism looks like. We know very well, too painfully, what oppression looks like. We know what discrimination looks like. We know what violence looks like. But what does racial justice look like? How does that look like and embodied in all parts of our lives, from hospitals to schools, to our neighborhoods, to our churches, right? to our ball clubs, etc. What does that actually look like? And that requires action, but it also requires imagination on our part. And the joining of others through solidarity, I think, lays a fertile ground for imagination, for us to dream about what that looks like, to co-create what that looks like together. I think doing it alone seems like a fairly lonely endeavor. And I don't know that any single one of us has enough imagination to picture what that is. But I do think there's synergy that comes from coming together and co-creating and imagining. And then lastly, for me, ultimately, I think solidarity is about hope. It is about hope. Frederick Douglass had a really powerful and sobering quote, and it said, power concedes nothing without demand. Let me say that again. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never does, it never will. And so that really speaks to the reality of the work that we have in front of us. And it is clear to me that the only way that change has ever happened in this country or anywhere else in the world is when people have come together, fought for a greater good, and made those demands loud and clear and persevered to that. So I hope that opportunities like this to talk about what that looks like, opportunities like this in Division 45 to come together to fight for a greater good, I think that is one of the rare pictures of solidarity that I see within psychology. So I just want to thank Rebecca and Rich for inviting me to share a little bit about what I think. Take care. Bye-bye.